Okay, today, as always, we learn the Ilu Nishmat Victor Chai Abram Ben Rachel Leah Mertzvi, give equal billing. Also today for Refuah Shlema for Ram Ben Leah Chasha and Noah Bat Shimrit. I mentioned to my wife yesterday that I was really looking forward to this class today. Not just to see all your smiling faces, but I knew the cookies would be a no. I did not know, but because of the topic. Many years ago, some of you know my prior life, that before I became Rabbi Nashul, I was in the business world. I was actually purchasing, director of purchasing for like 17 years at two companies. Both were manufacturers, and it was excellent preparation to become a Rabbi Nashul, and I'm not joking. Because being in purchasing, I dealt with hundreds and hundreds of people. And you learned a lot of, it was a manufacturer of locksmithing tools in Schiller Park, Illinois. And one was a framing manufacturer, made frames, custom frames. Also, they were in the city. And early on in my career, I actually, during the course of my career in purchasing, I went to multiple conferences over the years in different cities, purchasing conferences to learn how to do the job better and all kinds of stuff. So early on in the career, I was sent to, forgot which city. I wasn't sent. I actually asked to go to these different things because they were very helpful to me. And there was a list of different breakout sessions and the plenary session where the main speaker speaks to everyone before they break out to rooms. And one of the topics was metrics in purchasing. Okay. I said, what does the metric system have to do with purchasing? I didn't know the word metrics. I didn't understand the word. The word metrics is basically as follows. It's basically a tool for measuring. So, for example, if I say to you, is $100 a lot of money? What would be the answer? Yes. Depends. If I said you could buy a brand new Lexus for $100, is $100 a lot of money? Yes. You've lived here too long, Susie. Okay. If I say to you, what's that? What do you mean?
Because if there's a sale for an 18-pack of paper for the bathroom,
right?
And it's just a little bit more that people will not buy it here. They'll get the 4-pack because I have one for the 4-pack, and that's it. It's too much money to spend.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Okay. But let's say if I say to you 100 meters, is that far? So it depends. But God forbid a person's a stroke victim, they'll learn to walk again. It's a very long distance. If it's a matter of how far you have to go to get the chocolate chip cookie, it's pretty close. Okay. So this parak is about metrics in a sense. Because until now we spent a tremendous months and months in chapter 19 dealing with the concept of chassidut, piety, and gave us what all the things, the do's and the don'ts of how to be chassidut for dummies in a sense. That's a shalom. And now, like, very nice. How do I know? He alluded to it already in the last chapter, but in chapter 20, which begins on page in the small book 127, which is amazing because today is Shusham Purim and it's 127 provinces, right? Very good. I did not plan that. It's just yet another one of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things that happens to me literally all the time. Yesterday, my daf that I was doing in Yerushalmi had nothing to do with Purim. It talks about Kfarim. Oh no, Shulchan Aruch. It talked about Kfarim and it talked about something else that talked about having to do with Megillat Esther, which is really crazy. So let's look at chapter 20, Parak Kaf. But Mishkala Chasidut. I guess the best way doesn't mean the way, but it's like assessing and figuring out your approach to Chasidut. So let's say, for example, if I really learn chapter 19 very well, and I want to apply it to my life 100%. I'll be honest with you, there's no way I can. But let's say I wanted to do that. How do I know if I'm doing the right thing? Now, let's even take it away from this topic for a minute. Yeah, you have a Rebbe. Okay, interestingly enough, that is very little, the approach to certain areas of certain books, for example, especially Tanya, that is critical. The concept of Seder Charav, critical, but he really doesn't at any point in his writing, in the Ramchal, in Mesilat Yesharim, talk about having a mentor. He really doesn't. He talks about in general terms, but not like there's no specific chapter on having, you need a Rav, you need a Rebbe, you need to follow this, but there's a lot of internal work that's going on here. It doesn't mean he would be against it, but that's not his approach. Now, so let's say, for example, parenting. Let's say having a job. Take away from parenting. Let's take a regular job. A person is a purchasing manager. All right. At a manufacturer in Schiller Park, Illinois. How do I know if I'm doing a good job? Well, if they yell at me a lot, feedback. Okay, so that means if people walk by, say, good job, Zev, or the boss goes, you're doing fine. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm doing a good job.
Sales?
Maybe, no. So budgets, okay. All these things are right. Okay, these are all metrics, right? They're feedback, but you also have to have raw numbers. So for example, give you a true story that happened. I bought thousands of components. There were many things. I bought anything from steel to steel wire to cartons, everything for a manufacturing environment. And the most expensive product that we sold was something called a code key cutting machine. So, if you go to the locksmith and you cut your key, right? So very often on your original key, you have a number. And that number is a code. And they publish, and other companies publish code books that are meant to be used by locksmiths, not by robbers, that if you have that keyway, then the right key that matches your key, and you have that code, that it tells you the cuts that are made in that key. And obviously, it's a very simplistic way of putting it, but let's just say that's the easiest way to do it. So now what a locksmith would have to do until about 30 years ago, he'd have to open the book, find the key, the number, then he'd put the key in the key cutting machine and cut it based on the width of the cutter and all kinds of stuff. Came along a man who in Los Angeles who invented a machine called a code machine, which basically meant that all that information was put in the computer, and that all the person had to do was to punch in the code that was on the kind or whatever it was. I don't remember exactly. He punched in, and the machine did all the cutting. It knew what the code was. It knew therefore what to cut, which cutter wheel would have to be used. The machine retailed for, I don't remember, $1,500 or something. And there's the reason I'm telling you all these details here. And it was very popular. Obviously, it had a lot of components. The most expensive component was basically the computer, the brain that would go into it. The motherboard and some other stuff that went with it. Okay, fine. Comes the day that we had a lot of orders, and the sales are going crazy, and we have this big backlog of orders, and we're waiting for this one piece to come in. The most expensive component, it also has the longest lead time. It took like 8 weeks, 9 weeks from the time you ordered till the time you actually had it. They came in, and they were wired backwards. Wired backwards, which meant they wouldn't work. They only knew as soon as they started to install them, nothing was working. So I called the president of the company. It was a very big company by this point. I called the president. I said, and exactly like this, I said, hi, it's Zev at HPC. Here's what's going to happen. We received your boards today. They were wired backwards. They're coming to you UPS Red, which means next day delivery. UPS Red, you'll have them tomorrow. They're going to be fixed tomorrow. And tomorrow afternoon, you're going to send them back to the UPS Red. Not a problem. And he did it in 24-hour turnaround. Everything was done. Now, did I get a big pat on the back? Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember. But no, I didn't get any balls, that's for sure. Yeah. But you have to do something, think outside the box, and make sure something happens, no matter what. Be proactive and not reactive, or just sit there and go, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And by the way, that story taught me a lesson. I've used that approach many times in my life when things didn't go the way they were supposed to because of something that was out of my control, but to how to bring it more calmly than anything else. There's no screaming and yelling and any of that. And yes, I did throw my phone off the desk a few times. That's a different story. Anyways, so the idea being that I could sit then, if my review were to come up, so most people in most companies, they have a performance review, whether it's every 6 months, every year, and they have metrics, whether they call it that or not. Okay, it could be are you on time? Do you perform? Do we have things that are constantly on back order that you didn't order on time? So there's different ways of doing it. So let's take a look now. How does that apply to us when we talk about Chassidut? Now we have to talk about the way we assess and determine all this stuff we've been saying for months. How do we put when we do put it into practice, if we're doing it the right way? It's a very basic, fundamental concept when it comes to Chassidut. Listen what he just said. Here's all the stuff in chapter 19 that we spent 5 or 6 months on. And now he said, after all those things that are difficult and is hard to achieve and all, says the most difficult thing to do is to self-assess. By the way, you can do it with somebody else. Like, welcome to a 12-step program for Chassidut. But self-assessing, are you doing the right thing? He says, that's the hardest thing. Why? Because we can fool ourselves. Look at the way he says. It's a very fine line. We have a very big entryway, so to speak, for the Yetzirah to come into this whole process. Okay, therefore, this concept of self-assessment is dangerous. Because on the one hand, there's some things that are very good that the Yetzirah pushes off and says, don't do them. But other things that are really wrong for us to do, but the Yetzirah tells us, no, it's really the right. Matter of fact, you'll be such a chassid. Now, that sounds so weird, right? A guy who's achieved this level already, he said, "Oh, the Yetzirah is going to convince me that eating treif is okay. That going to speaking it lashon hara is okay." No, that's not what he's talking about. We'll see how he expands on this shortly. You want to be successful in this assessment, you have to at least accomplish the 3 steps or 3 parts. Number 1, you have to be honest with yourself. That's not direct translation. Direct translation is your heart has to be straight. You have to be brutally honest with yourself. Number 2, what is the goal of this self-assessment? It's not to say, yes, I am such a chassid. This is phenomenal. What a great chassid. I am living chapter 19 of Mesilat Yesharim. No, it's because you want to bring nachas to your father, Hashem. Number 3, v'sheyem me'ayen al ma'asav iyun gadol. You need to analyze your actions. No, it cannot be surface. You have to look in depth to what you're doing. And then it's not enough. You still need to correct where you've gone wrong. Going back to this performance review, you come in late 12% of the time, right? Okay, good. Now what are you going to do about that 12%? You need to reduce that. There has to be some action taken. So too, action has to be taken. It's not just self-assessment. And then after all that, you got to basically, as they would say in a recovery, turn it over to God. You need God's help in this. You're not going to be able to do this alone. We can't do anything alone, but especially this. Then you'll say that the person is praiseworthy, whose strength is with Hashem, and he will not withhold any goodness from you. But if he's missing one of these 3 components, he will not be reaching a level of completion to doing this. He's very close to falling and to stumbling. Meaning, if his intention is not pure, or he's not really analyzing properly depth-wise, or after all that, he still doesn't rely on Hashem with his bitachon in his creator, it's difficult to believe he's not going to trip up. By the way, if he doesn't trip, even if he does trip up, he does 2 out of the 3. It's also great, but it's not complete, right? A person who, I just learned something interesting from someone who's just in Egypt, that you only pay taxes on your home if it's finished. If it's in process, you don't pay taxes. That's why they have many homes that are incomplete, because they don't pay taxes then. That sounds like such an Israeli. Why did we think of that, right?
In Arab Philippines, they have.
Oh, that's
top floor,
right.
Very often.
Right.
For
For that reason, interesting. Okay, so do they have a house they're living in? Yes. They're not paying taxes. Yes. Okay, but it's not complete. So too at Lahavdil, the person he may do the inspection or the analysis, he may do this. It's not complete, but it's still a great step. But it's not what it will be to make the big complete chassid. Achim shloshtam yishmor karaui. But if he will do all three of them properly, meaning tmimut hamachashava, his pure thought, iyun, his true drilling down, so to speak, and analysis, will be tachon, and having trust in Hashem. He'll be able to walk around with true self-assuredness, let's say, and nothing will happen to him. Okay, well, that's a little bit of a stretch, the statement, okay, because it also leads someone to say, I've made it, right? No, even to himself, he could say, or I know how things, right, and then I'm going to check the list, so obviously this is not meant to be taken in the most literal sense, because always, as he says in the very beginning of the book, no matter where you are in this spectrum, you have to always be on guard. So this is the recipe. Okay, this is the recipe. The three things one has to do. These are the metrics by which one had to measure himself. But he's now going to give us, as I was reading this. Now, remember, I've taught this, I don't know how many times over the years, and I remember a lot of the book, and some of this stuff, I just don't remember if he said it or not. And as I'm reading this chapter, I said, wait, he's got to mention so-and-so, and thankfully he does. We'll get to that soon. What you need to understand. You can't judge the idea of Chassidut on the first look. And I'll explain this sentence after I finish it. But you have to think about the hashlachot. How do you say hashlachot in English? The long-term effects, the long-term
consequences.
Thank you. Of your actions. Because on the surface, it may seem like what you want to do is good, but the result or the outcome is not good. He has to leave it behind. Okay, now what this sentence means is as follows. Is it good to daven? Simple question. Is it good to daven? Yes. Okay. On what? I'm sitting in my house. Let's put it simple. I'm sitting in my house and I want to daven. I sit in the shul and I want to daven. It's a good thing. Very good. Okay. What if I'm middle of davening now and someone, God forbid, right next to me faints? I'm in shul esrei, man. I'm busy. True story. I've heard this multiple times. I think it's a true story. And even if it's not, it sounds like it could be a true story. There was a couple living in, I don't remember what city, the Chassidish family. And the husband and wife were starting to walk down the stairs and she tripped and fell boom, 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 down to the bottom. And he wouldn't pick her up and help her because she was in Nida. And she ended up in the hospital for a long time because till the ambulance came and helped her. And it was a very sad situation. She ended up divorcing him. There is a time when you need to do what you need to do. And if you are, I had this question yesterday, someone was not from Elayadumim, obviously not Yerushalayim because it's a Purim question. Someone was sick. They hadn't yet gotten to their spouse is sick. They haven't yet made it to the second Megillah reading. And then they called the doctor, says, you got to get to the ER now. And so we haven't heard the second, we haven't heard the second Megillah reading yet. What do we do? I said, go to the ER. I said, what about the Megillah reading? And it was not one of these, Hasidish, it just was a very plain, straightforward question. She was very concerned. I said, if someone reads it for you there, fine. If not, you got Tanakh, grab one. If you have a minute to read it out of Tanakh. But your priority now is not the Megillah, right? You're talking now mitzvah d'Rabbanan, reading Megillah, versus mitzvah d'Oraita, pikuach nefesh. That trumps everything. Go. Thankfully, I ended up having both, which was very helpful. psychologically. But there are times when we are going to do something, but on the surface it seems like it might be good, but if you look into it, it's not. So here's his examples. Because he needs to know this. There are two stories coming up. One of them you'll be familiar with. The second one, maybe. Gedalia ben Achikam. Psalm Gedalia, right? Many people have no idea why we fast on Psalm Gedalia. So the very, very short version is that when Gedalia was murdered, he was the last governor of Jerusalem. When he was murdered by Jews, it was the absolute end of the first Commonwealth, first Beit HaMikdash, and was the nail in the coffin for the Galut until the return of time of Ezra. What happened? Why did he get murdered? So he was appointed the governor for the last remnants of the Jews in Judea, and he got information came to him that a man now, I think it was Ishmael. You just see, I think it was his name. Yeah, Ishmael was plotting to kill him, but he didn't want to accept this because he said, "Oh, it's lashon hara. I can't. No. And of course, he gets murdered, and that's why we fast the day after Rosh Hashanah. That's the Reader's Digest version. Because he didn't want to hear this information. Imagine, lahavdil, someone has information that Iran is ready to bomb us. No. Oh, it's not Iran. Okay, somebody, because they're going to the Machshamam anyways, because they want to kill us. But I'm not talking about Iran. I'm talking about the Ayatollahs and all that. Machshamam. Say there's a fellow Jew who wants to. A great example. You have someone's going to paint your house, and I know that painter's no good. I know for a fact because he messed up my house, or he overcharges and he's not honest. No, I have a chiyuv. I have an obligation to tell you not to use him. You can't exaggerate and say, well, he's a terrible painter and he smacks his kids and he cheats on his taxes. No, it has nothing to do with it. You tell him you should not use him because he's not trustworthy. Don't use him because he does subpar work. That's perfectly fine. You have a chiyuv according to the Chafetz Chaim. Tell the person. But you say, oh, it's lashon hara. No, it's not. It's not lashon hara because there's to'elet. There's benefit because it's al tamod al dam reyacha. You can't stand by and watch someone else get hurt, whether it's financially or physically. So if a person says to himself, oh, it's lashon hara, I can't say that to anybody. I deal with this unfortunately a number of times over the years. That your desire to not to do an avera, quote unquote, has caused damage to somebody. So that's not chasidut. So here's the example. Hine ma'asa Gedalia ben Achikam. Galul le'einenu shemitnei rov chasiduto shelo ladun et Yishmael lechav chova or shelo lekabel lashon hara, because he desired not to. He wanted to give Yishmael the benefit of the doubt, nor did he want to accept lashon hara about a fellow Jew. Amar li Yochanan ben Kareach sheker ata dover Yishmael. So he told this man Yochanan ben Kareach, who was bringing him this information, this intelligence, says you're a liar. No chance. This with a name like Ishmael, what could go wrong? Uma garam, what did it cause? Garam shemethu, caused him to die. V'nifzru Yisrael, and Bnei Yisrael were spread out all over. V'chava gachaltam hanishara, and the last remnant of the flame was of the gachel. It's really as a coal was extinguished of the Jews in Israel. Not only that, the pasuk lays at his feet. All the people that got killed are based because of him. As if he himself killed them. The pasuk in Yirmiyahu refers to the people who killed by Yirmiyahu. He didn't by Gedalia. He didn't kill them, but it was because of him. Now, this next story you partially know for sure, but you need some more background. What is your, even if you looked ahead, the knee-jerk reaction to when I say to you, who does the Gemara say is at fault for the destruction of Beit HaMikdash? What was his name? Or who were their names? Remember the story? Kamsa bar Kamsa, right? Kamsa bar Kamsa nachrab Yerushalayim. Now, first of all, not for today, but the basic story was, and I have to give you before I give you the question, is that there were two men, one named Kamsa, one named Bar Kamsa. And the very rich guy wanted to throw a party, and he sent invitations. There was no WhatsApp yet, so he personally had people send to go to people's homes to invite them. Instead of inviting Kamsa, he invited Bar Kamsa, and he was an enemy of Bar Kamsa, and he hated Bar Kamsa, and he comes to the party, and the rich man says, I want to throw you out. He says, no, please don't embarrass me publicly like this. I'll pay for half the food. And he says, no, I'm going to throw you out. He says, I'll pay for all the food. Nope, he throws him out. And long story short, it's all time because the rabbis are at fault also because they were sitting there, they didn't say anything. Shock. And he ends up going to the governor and saying as a malshin, like malshin in English, like a tattletale, to the governor that the Jews are no good, and he says, I'm going to prove it to you. They won't even accept a korban from you, even though, by the way, a guy could bring a korban to the Beit HaMikdash. We know that from Sefer Melachim Perek Chet, Melachim Aleph Perek Chet. So he said, what he does is he takes an animal from the governor, and he takes a little knife and he makes a little nick in the animal. That for the Jews, it would not have been a problem to bring as a korban. And he says, for the Jews, it would be a problem to bring as a korban. And for the non-Jews, they would have still accepted it as being a complete animal. So he brings it to the Jews, and he said, this is from the governor. And so now they have the discussion, what are you supposed to do with this? On the one hand, they say, if we bring it, then it looks like you're allowed to bring a korban with the with the defect. On the other hand, if we don't, then we're going to be in deep stuff with the king or the governor. So this man named Zechariah ben Avkulis, he had a great idea. Let's just kill Bar Kamsa. That's going to solve everything. Nah. That's not good. You know why? Because what people say that if you bring a korban with a moon, that's death sentence. Nah, we can't do that. So his first idea was, he said, well, let me read this to you, and then we'll go into depth. Also, the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed by this kind of misguided Chasidut, because they didn't really give the proper assessment as to the whole situation. But by the way, the famous question is, the Gemara starts off by saying, this is in Masechet Gitin, Nun Vav, somewhere around there. It says, Al Kamsa bar Kamsa nechrav Beit HaMikdash, nechrav Yerushalayim. Okay. What did Kamsa do? He didn't do anything. He was the innocent bystander. He was at home. He didn't get invited. So why is it his fault? Why even just say because of bar Kamsa? That's your homework. Tisha B'Av, when we have a Suda, by the way, I'll give you the answer. Okay. It's not on Shabbat this year. That's not a trick one. Okay. What happened was the Chachamim said, you know what? Let's just bring this korban. Yeah, it has a moon, but let's bring it. What? Are you crazy? They'll say that you can bring a korban that has a moon. We should do something like that. So they thought maybe they should kill him, meaning Bar Kamsa. So there'll be no messenger going back to the king. Amar lahem Kulis. No, you can't do that. If you put a movement, people might think that but you take a korban, an animal that's meant to be brought as a korban, and you make a mum, it's a death sentence. So in the end, this Rasha Bar Kamsa goes and he gave a tattletale to the governor. Along comes the Caesar, the king, and he destroys Yerushalayim. This is what Rabbi Yochanan says in the Gemara. And the Tanuto Rabbi Zechariah, the humility, and that's meant to be taken sarcastically, of Rabbi Zechariah. Hechrivad Beitenu, our Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. V'sarfat Hechalenu, and the Hechal was burned. V'eglatnu Levein HaUmot, and we were sent to the Galut, which we are still in to this very day. You cannot judge the case only on your actions, what you're about to do right this minute. You have to look all over and to really investigate all the actions as much as you're able to do with your common sense. What's the best course of action? Being proactive or sitting back and not doing anything? Yes, partially. Yes, definitely partially. Butterfly effect. Definitely. So let's understand what's going on here first. All of our actions, I shouldn't say all, many of our actions could have no long-term effect other than what happens in the next 2 minutes to us, right? I decide to walk upstairs and take something off a desk. I don't know if you realize you make thousands of decisions a day. Almost constantly you're making decisions. You're not aware of it. Sometimes we have to make a decision, meaning, okay, do I do this or this? Do I weigh these possibilities? But we're making decisions. Do I take this pen or that pen? Right? Do I sit here? Do I move my chair back? Do I eat this food now? Do I eat it later? Answer to both. Why choose? But when it comes to things that are critically important, it's not enough. Let's say someone offers you a job, and it's really a good job. I told the story here. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about the story about the OU and what's called Nefesh B'Nefesh. I told the story here, right? So I was during the course of over the years, twice within 24 hours. It was amazing. Two amazing opportunities, and whatever I rejected both of them. It was very nice to be courted, but I said no. And in one case, I was a tremendous salary. I mean, compared to what a teacher makes, where they pay you like the end, like here's your coins. Can I have change back, please? But I also understood that the long-term effect of what it would be for me physically, family, right. So that made a big difference. And this is a few years ago. Right. Very good. So some decisions you really need to ponder and think exactly, go over and just because that they're going to have some long-term effect. Other times you may not even realize the long-term effect. It could be just something you say to somebody that you just like, oh, I just wish I could pull those words back because you really hurt someone. Or the opposite is you should have said something to somebody, right? The story, I actually learned from this story a lot. I don't remember where it took place, but I've actually done this as a result. So it's not my doing. It was a bar mitzvah. I don't remember if it was in Israel, it was outside of Israel, where the rabbi of the class was there, like all the bar mitzvah boys are there, the rabbi of the class is there, and everyone's dancing, and he notices one of the boys is sitting outside. And he went to him, and he's sitting there like his head down, and he sat and talked to him. The kid was evidently one of these that was being not bullied, was marginalized. He wasn't like the cool kid, but they had to invite everybody in the class. So he sat with him, and it made it such a difference that the story is told by the boy himself later in life, that it made a difference. And that rabbi came and sat with him and talked to him. So I tell this because not to say like, oh, wow, look what I do. That wasn't me in the story, but I have done that over the years when I've been to plenty of bar mitzvahs. So you see some kid on the sides, like, and you don't go over and say, hey, what are you, like the outcast? You don't want to do that. So you just, oh, Mazal Tov, it's good to see you. Why aren't you dancing? You want to come dance? Whatever it might be, just to get someone, it could be an adult, it could be a kid, doesn't make a difference who it is. Also depends how you approach. The long-term effect of what you say, of what you do, we know that there are times we have to make these decisions. He's telling us now that for the Chassid, it has to be almost for everything you do. Everything. Especially if it comes to a mitzvah versus aveira versus aveira. Because you may think you're about to do a mitzvah, but you're causing the biggest chilul Hashem. I love this example. You're sitting in row 32 on Turkish Air. Now, don't go Turkish Air. You're sitting on, I don't know, some airline. And it is, and the windows shades, the old-fashioned ones are all down, right? But you want to know if it's time to daven. You're flying to the States. So you keep opening the shade, closing, open the shade, closing it. And finally, there's this, you see the sun on the horizon, you open the shade. Time to daven. You take out your big tallis bag and you stand in the aisle and you put your tallis and go with the tzitzit over the head, and you smack two people next to you. Such a tzaddik. Now they're up to daven hanetz with me, right? What you just did, because you wanted to be a tzaddik and daven hanetz just before the sun comes up, is you just caused those two people who weren't religious, and you woke the guy up next to you with the screen up and down. You've just caused them to hate religion even more. But you're a tzaddik, right? No. And that's what this is talking about here. So wait a second. Doesn't the Torah tell us? It tells us if you're doing something wrong, You know someone's doing something wrong, you should say something to that person, right? It also depends how you say it, which we're going to talk about. You cannot walk up to somebody and under any circumstance saying, "Whoa, don't you know any better? Didn't you learn anything? Yapikoris, you whatever." Those are things that again drive people away. And there are many times where people attempt to give a little bit of, let's just say, encouragement instead of walling them out, encouragement to somebody, telling them they're doing something wrong, either at the wrong place or at the wrong time, when for sure what they're about to tell them is not going to be accepted. And it's going to cause them to go even worse. I told this story, but not everyone was here for it. I know I've told the story here before. It happened here at B'nai Shmuel before we made Aliyah. About the bar mitzvah, I know some of you have heard this story. There was a bar mitzvah in the shul. Oh, you remember? Oh, boy. I don't even know who it was, but I don't want to know, but tell me after, just joking. A boy who had gotten up to lane, and every 5 seconds, every 5 words, is somebody who felt that he was God's right-hand man and had to correct him. The kid was not religious, didn't have much of a background. Again, so I'm only reporting the story how I heard it. As he finished laning, he walked out of the shul, took off his kippah, and said, "I'm never going back to the shul again." Now that is on that person forever. Yep, forever. Now, hopefully it's someone came along and helped him after that, but he destroyed the kid. Right? No, but you had to make sure there was a mapike. So he said, kisuta instead of kisuta, right? You're such a tzaddik, you're such a chassid, you ruined this kid for his religious life. That's what this is about also. You have to be careful what you say and when you say it. In that case, what does it mean to be a chassid? Keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. Gemara says that just like it's a mitzvah to say something that you know will be heard, meaning it'll be accepted and someone will change, just it's equally a mitzvah, keep your mouth quiet and not say something when you know the person's not going to accept it. Imagine going into a community, a non-religious community, and telling people, you don't keep Shabbat. You don't keep kosher. Not only are they going to not do what you're saying, you correct their ways, they're going to make sure to go out of the way to eat more. What did Rav Kook Zatzal do? Exact opposite. He went to, I'm not going to have the whole story because I don't remember the whole thing, how he went to kibbutz, and many times the kibbutzim, they're not religious. They came, he brought us a little food, and then they ended up making a whole kosher kitchen for him, and they kept it that way. They in the takanon of the kibbutz, which is not religious, the chadar ochel have to be kosher. He did it by his actions. And he didn't go and say, "You're treif, you're treif, you're treif." I was at a levaya on, what's today, Wednesday? I was there on Monday, I think it was. When was for Monday night? So Monday I was at a levaya. A wonderful human being, passed away from Chicago, who's in our community, Shale Bellows, Zichrono Libracha, and a number of his children, grandchildren spoke, and all of them magnificently. He himself was a tremendous orator. And I went to him many times, as did many, many people, for advice, for ideas, thoughts. And one of his sons said, his son or his daughter said that they all said they learned so many things from their father. They want to share a couple things. And one was various phrases. And one was, never miss an opportunity to be silent. I love that line. Because you always think about the opportunity, like you want to say something and do something, but times, right? So what does it say in Kohelet? There are times to speak, times to be quiet. You have to learn when to be silent. Now, I did take a course many years ago in negotiations. It was a fantastic course. It was a one-day class. And one of the things they teach you in negotiations is silence is great. What does that mean? Let's say we're trying to work on a deal. I'm going to buy your building, right? You own the building. I'm going to buy it, rent out the apartments. And we're discussing, we're negotiating, and we have come to a point where you're $75,000 more than I want to pay. And I sit there. People hate silence. They hate, and they try to fill it. So the other person says, like, Oh, okay, fine. They'll step in. So someone raised their hand. This is, I don't know, it's got to be 40 years ago. What if both people took your course? He says, they'll both sit there in silence for hours. But there are times you need to be quiet. You don't, not everything you think of, you need to say. We see quite easy, simply that a person should run to do a mitzvah, and you should be the ones to be involved in it. But sometimes fights can break out as a result. That the mitzvah will be cheapened. That's not the right word. It'll be I don't know how to say it in English. Yeah, say it in English. Okay. Degraded. That's a better way. And eventually it just causes a chil Hashem. He gives an example. In that kind of situation, you should lead the mitzvah. Don't do it. As it says in Bamidbar Rabbah and the Midrash, Binyan Levi'im. This is what it says in the Midrash. They knew whoever carried the Aron, his reward was great. What do they do? Oh, I'm going to be the first one to carry the Aron. So they leave the Shulchan behind, the menorah, the Mizbeach. So they ran to carry the Aron, so they would be the ones to get the reward. We talk kach, and it was a result of that. They would fight and say, Anito en kan, I'll carry this part. Anito en kan. We talk kach as a result. Agin kalut rosh. They ended up acting in a very it means light-headed, but in a very foolish way. The Shekhinah injured them. Okay, I'm not going to get into the whole back the rest of the story, but there's also a story the Gemara tells about how they end up doing pies. By the way, if you don't know, this idea, like think evens, odds, and all that's from the Beit HaMikdash, if you know that. Okay, that when they determined, and you'll see this in the Avodah, and Yom Kippur, if you read the English, if you don't understand the Hebrew, you'll see that they would put out their fingers, a 1 or a 2, and never the thumb, 1 finger or 2, and the Kohen Gadol would stand in the center, all the Kohanim around, and they go, we count, let's say, to the head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Okay, you're working today. You're working today. That's called the pais. So one of the backgrounds to the pais I think it was for Trumat HaDeshet, for the removing of the ashes in the morning, it was necessary because what was happening was that people were like running up to the kevesh, the ram, and to do it, and they would they pushed one coin off and he got killed. Yeah, he broke his neck and died. So yeah, I'm going to be this chassid who's going to rip my tzitzit over my shoulder, and I'm going to smack someone in the face and wake him up and hate Judaism. I'm going to be the one who pushed the coin, but I was the one who brought the Trumat HaDeshet that day. Okay, that's his point here. Okay, again, just like we can learn something from chapters that we can't completely accomplish, I think this one's an easy one when it comes to that. We all can do a little bit of introspection when it comes to our actions that are more than just the big deal stuff, but some of the day-to-day stuff. What is going to be the result? Now, give you one last example. I think the Rav Shlomo Aviner Shlita is well known for his very quick, short, pithy responses to questions, which is why he gets literally hundreds a day, and he could never answer them in length. He was asked a question. I've seen this more than once in writing. Now, evidently, there's a skula that on Shabbat you don't fold your talis up after davening, and Motzei Shabbat after that you fold your talis then. And there's halachic reasons and whatever. So evidently, it's a skula for Shalom Bayit that you fold your talit after Shabbat. So a guy asks him, he sends a question. He says, my wife always bothers me, or nags, didn't say nag, but the equivalent of it's understood for the question, that I should come home right after shul because I need help with the kids, He says, isn't it a skula for Shalom Bayit to do the talis right after Shabbat? He says it's a bigger school of Shalom Bayit to wash the dishes. Okay. So notice this guy wants to be a tzaddik on his wife's back. Right? Unfortunately, we see a lot. What happens when people say that they can't go to shul? They got to go to shir. They got to go to this. They got to. Well, but the kids are screaming, and there's one peed all over the floor. Sorry, got a shir to go to. Right? I've had the question come to me. Yom Kippur. They're both healthy. The parents are both healthy, but they have a number of kids, and the kids are very difficult and very needy. wife being home alone will cause her to end up being sick, headache, and maybe have to. The guy has to stay home. You stay home, you dominate home. Sure, it's better being short, but it can't come at the expense of your family's health, right? So there's all kinds of things, and that's what this chapter is really about. Also, we have a little more to do. Next